Suffolk Public Library's Own Your Career Job Searching series. Today we're going to talk about interviewing in a digital world. Just to do a quick overview, we're going to talk a little bit about some technical things, so different platforms that might be used for virtual interviews, some common technical issues. We're going to talk about the actual interview, so preparation to do before, what to wear, tips for during the interview, presentations, so these are not always required. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about some different platforms that you can use, some design tips, and some general tips for doing presentations during an interview, and then things that you can get from the Suffolk Public Library. Some of the platforms that are being commonly used right now for virtual interviewing are Zoom, Skype, WebEx, Google Meets, and then there's some other platforms that are a little bit harder to pin down because a lot of those ones require a subscription to be able to access. So starting with Zoom. Zoom is the leader in modern enterprise video communications with an easy, reliable cloud platform for video and audio conferencing, chat, and webinars. I'm actually recording today's session using Zoom. So it also has a recording feature. The platform can be used in an internet browser, through a downloaded desktop application, an application downloaded to a smart device, or by calling using the phone number that's provided within the invitation. So you can't call directly in from a phone. The thing about calling in from a phone is that you may not have all of the accessibility that you would with an app. So you'd lose the ability to use your camera, to share your screen, or to use the chat functions or record. A little bit about the Zoom basics, just in case you end up using the platform and you're unfamiliar with it. So the mute button has the little microphone, toggles your microphone on and off. The little camera, it'll either say start or stop video, turns your video on or off. You won't really have a reason to use the security button unless you're the one hosting the meeting. Participants just lets you see who all is in the conference call. So if you need to see how somebody spells their name, or you want to make sure that you have everyone represented in your notes, you can open the participants tab to see everybody's name laid out there. The only caveat is if anybody is sharing a camera. So if you have two people that are in the same room sharing an account, you may not have both of their names there on the screen. This chat button, the little talk bubble there, allows you to open a text chat window. So if you're on a laptop or desktop, it opens onto the side, or if you're full screen, it will pop up into the center of the screen. For the text chat, you can use the feature to chat to everybody. So if you wanted to send a link for people to see your presentation, or send a link to a virtual portfolio, or send a link for them to download copies of your resume if that was needed, you could send that to everybody. If you needed to chat an individual, you could do that as well by selecting a name from the drop-down menu in the chat window. The next option is to share your screen. This is really important if you're doing any sort of presentation. You'll want to make sure that you share your screen for participants to be able to follow along. This feature may or may not be allowed. So if you're in a call and it pops up saying that it's not allowed, you may have to ask for permission from the host to use that. As far as record, it's unlikely that you'll use record in the actual interview, but if you wanted to record yourself practicing, you can just hit that button there and it will offer you a couple of options to either record to the cloud, where you'll have to go onto the website to your account to download it or to view it, or you can have it record to a local disk drive, which means it will record directly to that computer. And reactions may or may not be enabled. This isn't necessary for interviews, but it allows you to do like thumbs up, smiley face, that sort of thing. And the last button here is the end button. That ends the call. If you're not the host, it just ends it for you. If you are the host, then you have the option to end it just for you or to end it for everyone. Again, not every button may appear on your screen, and not every feature may be enabled. The next platform is Skype. Although Skype is being phased out, Microsoft is rolling Skype into its Microsoft Teams feature, so this one may appear less and less, but it is still being used in some areas. Skype is a free online calling and messaging platform, but it also has the capability of making video and audio calls. You can join calls through Skype, the Skype app, on a desktop or a smart device. You can also use a phone to call into the meeting. If you're calling in from the phone, similar to Zoom, there may be features that you don't have access to. So some quick basics for Skype. The little camera icon turns your camera on and off. The microphone icon turns your microphone on and off. The button that looks like a TV screen or a computer monitor that allows you to share your screen, and the red telephone button is the call. There's some other buttons that you can see here in this screenshot. So if you're sharing your screen, you can request control from the host to be able to control their mouse. It's unlikely that you'll do that during an interview. So WebEx is through Cisco. It's the leading enterprise solution for video conferencing, online meetings, screen share, and webinars. It can be used in an internet browser through a downloaded desktop application, an application downloaded to a smart device, or by calling using the provided phone number in the invitation. Again, similar to that with Zoom and Skype, if you decide to call in, there may be some features that you do not have access to. So a little bit about how to use WebEx. Similar to the others, the microphone turns your microphone on and off. The little camera turns your camera on and off. The box with the arrow pointing out of it that has share next to it is the screen share button. So this allows you to share your screen. Um, the record button, again, you may not want to use this when you're in your actual interview. But if you're practicing and you want to be able to see how you do, this could be a good option to allow you to look at your performance and give yourself some feedback. WebEx also has the option to do reactions or emojis. Similar to Zoom, the participants button will allow you to see who all's on the call so you can see how to spell names, etc. And the chat feature is very similar to that in Zoom as well. Now, the red X will end the call. Similar to Zoom, not every button may appear on your screen and not every feature may be enabled. Google Meets is another option. This is a browser-based real-time meeting with audio, video screen sharing, and it has the capability of doing auto-generated captions. So if you have some hearing impairment, this may be a good option if you have the opportunity to make a recommendation. The caveat is that the auto-generated captions are not always accurate. So if something seems a little weird, you may need to ask some questions. This can be used through an internet browser, through a downloaded desktop application, an application downloaded to a smart device, or by calling using the provided phone number in the invitation. Similar to some of the other platforms, by calling in, you may not have access to all of the functions of the application. So for Google Meets, similar, the microphone there turns your microphone on and off. The camera turns your camera on and off. Right here, you can see the turn on captions. So this turns on and off those auto-generated captions. Present now is your screen share option. Up here in the top corner, you have the little people icon. The little people icon lets you see the participants. Right next to it is the chat bubble, so that opens that chat window. Google Meets also has a clock in it, so if you're worried about time or if you have a certain amount of time that you're allowed to use for your presentation, it gives you the opportunity to keep track of time there without having to look at your watch or if you're in full screen worrying about being able to see your computer's clock. And the red phone icon here allows you to end the call for yourself. So as I said, some of these other platforms that are out there are a little bit harder to get access to. So if the presenter is using something that I have not covered in this presentation, see if there is a free version that you can sign up for in order to practice using the software and get familiar with the buttons. You can also go to that software's webpage, and typically they'll have a frequently asked questions or an FAQ or some sort of user guide available that you can look over to learn more about the functionality of the platform. So learning about the different buttons, learning about if you're able to download it, that sort of thing. So some common issues currently are inconsistent or poor Wi-Fi access. If you are concerned about your Wi-Fi cutting out during the interview, try accessing Wi-Fi at the library or at a local business that has free Wi-Fi. Your microphone or video not working, check that the default microphone and video are the device that you're using by either going into the settings in the call or into the device settings. You can select the camera and microphone you plan to use. You can also try to disconnect and reconnect the call to see if that helps. If you're using the default camera and microphone and whatever device you're using, Typically, it will connect pretty well, but you may need to disconnect and reconnect the call without having to go through all the steps of going through the settings. But if you're using an external device, so something that you have to plug in, or that's like Bluetooth, so if you're using like a Bluetooth microphone, you may have to check your settings. This is why it's important to practice beforehand, so that way you can see if there are technical things that you can kind of work through without having to do it at the moment in the interview. If you're having trouble hearing other people, check that your sound is turned on. You can also check that your default sound option is what the device that you're using, and you can do that in the same way that you would your microphone. Uh, so if you're using headphones or Bluetooth headphones, making sure that your computer is using those as your default for the call. So now getting into the actual interview. So preparing before your interview, you're going to want to review your resume, making sure that you are familiar with everything that you included in case that they ask specific questions about a specific experience that you had. Review the position description from the job posting. So looking through the minimum requirements, the preferred requirements, and then the actual job responsibility portion, and taking some notes about things that you want to make sure that you talk about based on your resume and the position description. Check out the company's website and or their social media. This can tell you actually a lot about the company's values, the projects they're working on, uh, and just kind of their overall environment and approach. You can also look through their mission statement and look at some of the things that they're proud of. Those will be the things that they're featuring on their social media, or they'll be under some sort of like awards and recognition on their website. It's important to take notes about some of this stuff because you can use it in your question asking at the end of the interview, but you can also tie some of your answers back into some of the information you learned about the company. So another important thing is to draft a list of questions that you have after reviewing all the information above. It's important to have questions that you can ask them about the position, the company, the work culture. It shows that you're doing your research and that you're interested in learning more about the position and wanting to make sure that you're a right fit for the job. So some examples can be, how would you describe the work culture? What sort of professional development opportunities are available? What would the ideal candidate have beyond the job description? And are there opportunities for advancement? Are there opportunities to move up? Take notes on what you've reviewed and write down your questions. It's important to have those all written down so you can quickly reference it during the interview. Give yourself a pep talk or have someone you trust give you a pep talk. Look up common interview questions and practice your answers, and you can practice with a friend. There are also different organizations that will do practice interviews and things as well. And before you start, especially a virtual interview or a phone interview, try doing a power pose to boost your confidence. So think like superhero stances. For virtual interviews in particular, especially if they're over the phone, doing a confidence booster beforehand can help maintain your confidence throughout the call. Um, if you can't pick up on the visual cues of the people that you're interviewing with, so whether they're nodding or smiling, sometimes it can be a little hard to maintain your confidence throughout. So I really encourage doing things to help make you feel a little bit more confident for those moments where you can't necessarily gauge the reaction from the people interviewing you. A little bit about what to wear. So the clothing should appear clean. Try to avoid things that have stains or that will show, like if you start sweating, that sort of thing. When possible, aim for business casual or business professional. So collared shirts, ties, nice blouses, slacks or skirts, dress pants, nice dresses, um, sport coat or blazer. If you don't have business clothing, do your best to wear something that's a plain t-shirt. So no logos or graphics on it. If you have one that looks a little nicer, that's important too. So like khakis or plain jeans. The important thing is to um, try not to make your clothing be a distraction for your interview. Even if you have an interview over the phone or a video conference, dress nice as it can help boost your confidence and keep you in the right headspace during the interview. Some things for during the interview: don't be afraid to take your own notes. Taking notes of who's in your interview is important because you can then respond to them by name when they're asking questions, but you can also then give thank you notes or thank you emails later. Um, And taking notes will also help if something comes up while you're interviewing or they ask a question that has some information that you want to do some of your own follow up about. You can draft that down and then be able to ask that question later. Make sure you have the notes from your review of your resume and website and all that and your questions out. That way you're not having to shuffle and find them uh, when the opportunity comes up. If they ask a question and you don't have an answer readily available, it's okay to take a moment to think. There's no expectation that you can immediately respond to a question. If you need a moment to think back about your experiences, or if it's something that you don't necessarily have direct experience with, but you want to find something that can connect, it's okay to take that moment. And you can also ask them for a moment if you're concerned about it. On the same note, interviews are also often taking their own notes. So if there's silence after you finish answering a question, that's okay. They may still be uh, writing down their notes about your response. You don't have to fill up all of that empty time. So don't feel obligated to continue talking if there's silence when you finish. If you're not sure about what a question is asking, try asking them to repeat it for you, or you can try repeating back what you heard and ask them if that's the question that they're asking, or you can ask them for some just general clarification. I'm not sure what you mean. Could you give me a little bit more information? Or I want to make sure that I'm providing my best answer. I'm a little unsure about this portion of the question. Every chance you get, tie your answers back to your experiences and accomplishments. This is why reviewing your resume is important, making sure that you're aware of what's in there. And if it's something that's not directly in your resume, feel free to share that as well, because your resume doesn't have everything that you've done. Avoid speaking negatively about past employers or businesses or potential other candidates. So if you know somebody else who's applying for the same position, focus on you during your interview. Don't talk about them, especially not in a negative light. Um, Speaking negatively about past employers or potential other candidates only shows a negative light on you. Respond truthfully. It's and always practice good manners and be respectful. All right. So presentations. Not every position and not every interview will require you to prepare a presentation, but I wanted to make sure that I covered the topic because presentations can be a pretty heavy thing to prepare for. So if you're going to be required to do a presentation, you'll know that before you get into the interview because they'll give you the presentation requirements as far as the time requirements, the topic, that sort of thing. And they'll usually give that to you when they schedule your interview or shortly after they schedule your interview. So I'm not going to go in depth into how to use these options. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what they are and what some of their benefits are. So we're going to talk a little bit about Google Slides, PowerPoint, and Prezi. So PowerPoint is a slide-based presentation software with features to help make a dynamic presentation or pitch deck. It has tons of easy-to-use templates. PowerPoint is used through Microsoft and often used as a desktop application, but can be used online if you have access to a Microsoft 365 account. PowerPoint makes a linear presentation. So what that means is it's the first slide and topic comes directly after the next. And when you print it out or you look at it in a printout, each picture is in order. PowerPoint is pretty easy to use, and there are tons of tutorials on how to use PowerPoint out there. The next option is Google Slides, which is Google's version of PowerPoint, essentially. However, it's housed through Google Drive, so it's housed in the Google Cloud. Whatever presentations you make in Google Drive can be downloaded as a PowerPoint presentation if you need to. One of the benefits of using Google Slides is if you don't want to carry around a flash drive or you don't have to worry about like emailing it to yourself or having to have your own device to do a presentation, specifically in person, you can access Google Drive anywhere that you have access to the internet. Additionally, with Google Slides, there are different add-ons that you can use that can make your presentation more interactive and dynamic. So you can add Poll Anywhere, which allows you to create live polls for your presentations that participants use a smart device to engage with. There are also two different programs, Nearpod and Pear Deck. They're very similar, but they have some slight differences in their actual activities that they have available. These programs allow participants to directly join your presentation from a device. So you provide them with an access code and they go to the website and your presentation will appear on their smartphone if they use their smartphone to log in. So they'll be able to see your slides as well as when activities pop up, they'll be able to participate in those activities from their device. Um, the activities can range from like drawing something on their phone or smart device to participate in the question to a quiz or game show type activity. Both programs work really well for people with visual impairments because they both respond to screen readers. They also each have a variety of those interactive activities, like I said. Google Slides also has a ton of easy to use templates that are created by Google and by other Google users. The next platform I want to talk about is Prezi. Prezi is a dynamic online presentation platform, unlike PowerPoint or Google Slides. So like Google, this one is online. Unlike Google Slides, you can't download it to present it as easily. Prezi is not a slide deck platform, so you won't see something similar like what I'm using right now. Instead, it uses an overall image and then it moves through the image in unique ways. So it may zoom into a spot to show some text and then zoom back out. It might twist and turn and move around the image to show some different information as you move through the presentation. They do also have tons of templates to use. One of the things that can be really challenging with Prezi is it's not as simple or as intuitive as PowerPoint or Google Slides. It does take a minute to learn how to use it. And Prezi can also be visually overwhelming for some people. It is very easy to get into a trap of flipping the screen up and down and spinning the presentation that can make people really dizzy and uncomfortable. So some design tips for presentations: light text on dark background is easier for people with visual impairments to be able to read and see. So for example, I'm using white text on a black background. By doing this, I'm also making sure that anybody that experiences any type of color blindness will still be able to see the text and everything on the presentation slides. Keep things simple. You don't need a ton of videos or flashy transitions or animations or an overly complicated template to make a good presentation. You can do things to help make it a little bit more polished, but you don't want anything that's going to be distracting or keep people from being able to focus on what's on, like what the content is on the slide or what you're talking about. Presentations are just really an opportunity for you to showcase the knowledge or ideas that you bring to the table. When possible, provide copies of your presentation to participants. So if you're in person, you can print copies, and for Google Slides and PowerPoint, you can print off what's called the notes page, and it can have multiple slides per page and give space for people to take notes throughout your presentation on. Doing it that way will also save you paper. If it's a virtual presentation, you can provide a link for them to see it or to access a copy. This can be beneficial for when they go back to discuss your interview and presentation later, because they'll have that copy of your presentation to review as well. If you need to print copies, you can come to the library and print off copies that you need. And don't make it too text heavy, but also make sure your text covers the gist of what you're talking about. I know that sounds a little contradictory, but if you make it too text heavy, it's very hard for people to read, and it kind of makes the presentation a little boring. But the reason you want to make sure that your text covers the gist of what you're talking about is if you have anybody that has any hearing impairments, they're going to be using most likely whatever's on the screen. And if you don't have something that allows them to use captioning, or if they don't have access to something that allows them to caption your presentation, they're really basing their understanding of what you're presenting on what's on the screen. So some general tips: make sure that you practice your presentation and time yourself. Typically, if you're doing a presentation for an interview, they're going to give you a time limit. So you want to make sure that you're able to get through your presentation in that time. Also practice giving it over the virtual platform if you can. Don't be afraid to have notes for you to reference. And so you can always look at your presentation slides if you feel very confident in the material. If you're at all unsure, feel free to write notes for yourself, little reminders. If you want to remind yourself to tell a specific story during a specific part of the presentation or to ask the audience a specific question, make sure that you've written that down so that way you can reference back to it if you get a little nervous. Be prepared for questions about your presentation, not just the content, but why you decided to talk about that topic or how you went about preparing your presentation or doing the research that may have been required. When possible, try to make it interactive. This can be as simple as just asking a question of the participants at a specific point in your presentation. But you can also use those add-ons we talked about in Google to add in um, different activities, polls, etc. So some things that you can get from the Suffolk Public Library to help support you if you have a virtual interview. We have access to Wi-Fi to go hotspots. However, there's usually a waiting list. So if you think that you're going to be doing an interview, it may be beneficial to try to get onto that waiting list early. And we also have reservable technology. So we have a laptop that you can use in the building or parking lot to access the library's Wi-Fi. So if you don't have a laptop and you'd like to be able to use one, you can come and check that out and you get it for 4 hours. And you can use it in the building or out in the parking lot if you want to sit in your car or sit out at one of our benches or picnic tables. Our Wi-Fi does reach the parking lot. So even if you don't want to use one of our laptops, you can bring your own and use it in our parking lots or in the building when we're open to the public. We also have different books, ebooks, and audiobooks that you can access about interviewing, building your confidence, creating presentations, or to research specific topics if you have a professional presentation that you need to do. So thank you for joining us for this installment of Own Your Career, Job Searching. Keep an eye out for our next installment next month.